Masechet Baba Batra Daf Nun Bet Anu Baraita Tenor Rabbanan En Mekabelin Pikdonot Lo Min Hanashim Velo Min Ha'abadim Velo Min Hatinokot. One should not accept a deposit if someone has some item and they ask you, hey, can you watch this for me? Hold on to it for a month. I'm going away. So one can accept it from, normally one can accept it. However, if it's coming from a woman, we're talking about a married woman, one should not accept it, nor from slaves, nor from children. Why not? Because in all these three cases, we suspect that perhaps this item, let's say it's a bracelet, does not actually belong to this wife or the slave or this child. It could be that they took it from their husband or their master or their father, and it's not really theirs. So in general, if you think that something is a stolen object, let's say this guy is you suspect is a thief, and he comes and says, hey, can you hold on to this bracelet for me? So then you are not allowed to take it as a deposit, because if you do, you are helping a thief. So you shouldn't do that. And so in these cases, the wife, it is possible for a wife to own her own property. So too a slave. Even though a slave, anything any work that he does or anything that he finds goes immediately to the master, it is possible, nevertheless, for someone to give a gift to the slave on condition that it doesn't go to the master. And then the slave will actually own that item. So it is possible for all of these three people to own items, and it could be that very well that it's theirs, and they want you to hold on to it for them. However, since we suspect that in many cases it's not theirs, and maybe realizing or not, they took it from their husband, master, father, and it's not really theirs, so you should not take it as a deposit. That's the first law. קיבל מן האישה יחזיר לאישה, ואם מתה יחזיר לבעלה. קיבל מן העבד יחזיר לעבד, ואם מת יחזיר לרבו. If one did accept a bracelet from a married woman, and she said, can you hold it for a month? Even though you weren't supposed to take it, but you did. You said, okay, I'm happy to watch this for you. And then she comes back after a month and says, okay, can you return it? So you should return it to her, because, again, we're afraid that maybe it's stolen, but we don't assume that it's definitely stolen. So if she says, can I have it back? We give it back to her, and you don't have to go and not give it back to her, or give it back to her husband, or take it to court. In other words, b'di'avad. Don't take it in the lichatechila, but b'di'avad. If you took it from her, then you can give it back to her with the assumption that it's likely that it is hers. However, if she dies, then you give it to the husband, because either way, it doesn't matter whether she took it from her husband without permission, so then it belongs to the husband, and even if it was hers, her own property, when a wife dies, the husband inherits her, so then it's going to go to the husband no matter what. And one should not take an item from a slave because perhaps it was stolen, so don't get involved. But if you already got involved and took it from the slave and watched it, and now he comes to collect it back, give it back to him, because we don't know for sure it's stolen property. So we assume that it is in fact his. Once you already accepted it, you return it to him. If the slave dies, then you give it back to the master, because, well, maybe he in fact took it from the master, and therefore we're going to give it back to him. קיבל מן הקטן יעשה לו סגולה, ואם מת יחזיר ליורשיו. If one accepted something from a child, and again, there also you shouldn't do so. You go and find out, right? Are you sure it's yours? Maybe it's your father's, that you took it. But if you did take it from a child, and now it's time to give it back, do not give it back to the child. This is different from the previous ones. In this case, we will assume, fine, it belongs to the child, but the child is not going to be responsible for it. For example, if he's an orphan and there's no one to take care of the item, and therefore don't give it back to the child for the child's interest. Instead, make it into an investment. Sigula here means make it a treasure, something special that you hide away so that its value will be retained. You should invest it. This is the original meaning of sigula, like Bnei Israel, or an am sigula, a treasured nation. Later on, it takes on the meaning of an incantation. But incantation also, you kind of put it into something that you wear around your neck, so you kind of are treating it as something that would be treasured. But this is the original meaning. that you should invest it on behalf of the child. If the child dies, then you give it to the heirs of the child, whoever would be, whoever are the heirs, if it's parents or brothers or whoever it is. וכולן שאמרו בשעת מיתתן של פלוניהן יעשה כפירושן, ואם לאו יעשה פירוש לפירושן. The Braita continues and says, if any of these three people at the time of their death, on their deathbed, right, said, oh, I'm about to die, you remember that bracelet that I asked you to watch? Listen, it belongs to that person, Mr. So-and-so. So if they say that, then you should follow perushan, that which they specified. They specified a certain person, right? Said this thing, I myself was borrowing it from that person. So just like if they were alive, you'd give it back to them. So too, if a slave is about to die, and he says it belongs to that person, we assume a person is not going to be lying on his deathbed. In any case, he could take it back and then give it to him, that person himself. So we follow what they say. However, v'im lav, if he does not, it doesn't mean if he doesn't specify, because then for sure you wouldn't have, to give it to. It means here, if he says something, but it's not credible, he said it belongs to that person, but it doesn't sound right, and you don't believe what the person says, then you should make an explanation of their specification. All right, perush le perushan. In other words, you want to follow what they say, but what they said doesn't really make sense. So the word perush can mean to specify. It could also mean a commentary. So make a commentary on their commentary. It says, oh, when this person said it belonged to so-and-so, what they probably meant is that this is something that that person would like, or someone related to that person. And so you give some kind of explanation to what they said, but basically you're going to reinterpret what they said and give it to someone that's appropriate. That makes sense. Debitu de Rabba bar Barchana ki kashach ba amira hane kefe de Marta ubne berata. We have a story now of the wife of Rabba bar Barchana. She had some rings, and she says, these rings that I have, she was on her deathbed, and she said, these rings that I have actually belong to this woman named Marta and the sons of her daughter and her grandsons. They're not mine. I have them there. I'm holding them for them, so we give it to those people. And so then she died, and the people that were in charge of her estate didn't know what to do with these rings. So they asked Rav for judgment, and he said, if you believe her, then do what she said. It sounds believable, and it probably is Marta's. So then go give it to Marta and her grandsons. However, if you don't believe her and it sounds something is wrong here, then you make an explanation for her explanation. So that would mean you give it to her heirs or keep it for yourself if it doesn't belong to anybody. And so give an explanation that makes sense. Vika de amri, hachi amar le, I amida lach ase keperusha, v'ila ase perush leperusha. Or another version, it's not about whether you believe her or not. In other words, is she a credible person? Is she a type of person who's always honest, or sometimes she lies? It's not about her believing her, but rather make an assessment. Make an assessment of this Marta. Right? Look at these rings. Are they expensive rings? Marta and her family, are they wealthy? Is this something that is likely that they would afford? Is this their style, their type, that they would own such a thing? And so make an assessment, and if it makes sense, then follow her instructions. And if not, there's no way that Marta owns these things, then make a commentary on her specification and give it to someone who is appropriate. Min hakatan yaseh lo segula. Mai segula? Rav Chisda amar sefer Torah. Rabba bar Rav Huna amar dikla de'achal mineh tamreh. Now in the Braita it says that if you took something from a child, even though you shouldn't have in the first place, then do not give it back to the child, even though we will assume that it probably is it's his, but since it's a child, child may not be responsible with it. So instead, make it an investment. So what does that mean, make it a safe investment? Two opinions. Rav Chisda says, use the money to buy a Sefer Torah. And that way the child can use it and learn from it and grow. And the Sefer Torah also will retain its value and can always be used and sold later on. Abba, the son of Rav Huna, says, use it to buy a date palm because it will produce dates all the time and that will benefit the child. And it will also retain its value, the principle in the tree. So put it in something that retains its value and also is usable by the child. Now all the way back to the Mishnah that says that a father cannot claim a chazakah for the property of a child, nor a child for the property of the father. In other words, if a child is using the produce of his father's field for 3 years, he cannot claim, oh, see, I'm using it for 3 years. My father never kicked me off, never protested. Therefore, he sold. It's mine, and I claim he sold it to me. No, we don't say that because probably the father didn't protest because it's his son, and the same thing a son with his father. Generally, family members don't mind if another family member comes and is living in their house or using their property. But it doesn't mean it belongs to them. Amar Rav Yosef, afilu chalku, Rava amar chalku la. So Rav Yosef says, this is true that you cannot make a chazakah, not only if the son is dependent on the father, and they're working in the same business, then for sure the father's there, the son is there, because the father is providing for the son. That's why he's consuming it. The father works with the son, so that's why he's there on the farm. That's for sure true. Everyone agrees. Rav Yosef says even if they stay separated, the kid grew up and he started his own business. He's in a different place, in a different business. He's a plumber. And yet he comes and he uses a certain field on a regular basis for 3 years. Even so, the son cannot claim a chazakah, because even though the son is no longer dependent and working with his father, nevertheless, the father is generally generous and says, okay, so my son is taking from that field, it's okay, I don't mind. And therefore you cannot make a chazakah. Rava disagrees and says, no, if he's dependent, then there's no chazakah. But if they separated, then the son does make a chazakah, because the father generally would say, okay, it's okay, you take an olive or two, but for 3 years to use a harvest of a field, then at that point the father would say, okay, you have your own business, this is my business, and should make a protest. And if he doesn't, then the son can make a claim that this is mine and my father sold it to me. Amar Rav Yirmiyah midifti, abad papi obada, halku la kerava. Rav Yirmiyah from Difti said that there was an actual case just like this that came to Rav Papi, and it was about a father and son who separated. And then the son wanted to make a chazakah, and he ruled like Rava that says that the rule that a father and son cannot make a chazakah on each other does not apply when they separated. In other words, they can make a chazakah. And so he ruled like that and said, yes, the son can make a chazakah because their business is separated. The son is not dependent on the father. And so if the son used a field for 3 years, the father should have protested. He didn't protest, then the son can claim that he bought it. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, ishta'i li Rav Chia mehurmiz ardeshir, de ishta'i le Rav Acha bar Yaakov, mishemeh de Rav Nachman bar Yaakov, chalku la. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak reports that Rav Chia from a place called Hurmiz Ardeshir. These are names of Persian rulers, and so these are place names that were named after the Persian rulers. So Rav Chia, that comes from this place, told Rav Nachman that Rav Acha, the son of Yaakov, said in the name of Rav Nachman bar Yaakov. So we have a long chain of transmission. We would probably say, if it's so many different, this broken telephone, is it really true? But I think the Talmud is saying the opposite. When you can specify precisely who said this in term from the name of whom, in the name of whom, so that actually authenticates this tradition that we know precisely where it comes from. And this tradition also says that if if the father and son separated, then the halacha of the Mishnah does not apply, and the son can make a chazakah on the father's property and vice versa. And in fact, the halacha is that way, that as long as the father and son separated, they are like everybody else and they can make a chazakah. Tanyana mehachi, ben shechalak v'ishto shenitgaresha, harehen kishar kol adam. And there's a braita that backs us up, because it says that a son who separated from his father, and similarly a wife who divorced was divorced from her husband, they become like everybody else. Even though while they're married, a wife cannot claim a chazakah, because the husband doesn't mind that generally that his wife is going and taking some produce from one of his fields, but after they're divorced, well then generally he would mind and he should protest. And same thing with a father and son who separated. So once they are separate in separate businesses, then you can make a chazakah the same way that anybody else in the world can make a chazakah. איתמר, אחד מן האחים שהיה נושא ונותן בתוך הבית, והיו עונות ושטרות יוסין על שמו, ואמר, שלי הם, שנפלו מבית אבי אמה. The case is that you have a father that died, and he has leaving some sons. And one of the brothers is the managing brother. He is engaging in commerce within the house, meaning regarding the estate. We'll see in a minute whether they're sharing all their expenses or they have independent expenses. Okay, so we have one managing brother, and they haven't separated the estate, and he's managing the estate on behalf of all of his brothers. Now, in addition, this managing brother has onot, that means bills of sale, and other documents that has his own name on it. He's buying something with his name, selling things with his own name on it. So he claims, oh, this is mine. I am running two separate businesses. One I'm running on behalf of the estate, and I also have other money that I inherited from my mother's family. These brothers share the same father, but they have different mothers. And so he says, oh, from my mother's father, he died, and he bequeathed to me these properties. And so these documents, they belong to me. And I'm also managing that of the father, their shared estate. But this is mine. So is he believed to say so, or can they suspect him and say, hey, you're running the estate. We think that you're siphoning off some money from the estate for yourself and putting your own name on it. That's what they're accusing him of. Amar Rav, alav lehavi ra'aya. Ushmal amar alachin lehavi ra'aya. So it's machloket. Rav says that the managing brother has to bring proof that, in fact, yes, he received money from somewhere else, and this is his own. These are his own properties. We'll see what kind of proof he has to bring. And Shemuel says, no, look, he has a document, it has his name on it. So who said that he's lying? Let the brothers bring proof that he stole, and then they can come and take it. But it's, the burden of proof is upon them. Amar Shemuel, Modeli Abba, she'im met alachin lavi re'aya. Shemuel says that Abba, that's Rav's actual name. His name is Rav Abba. So Shemuel called him by his first name without the honorific. So he says, Shemuel says that Abba, that's Rav, agrees with me that if that managing brother died, then the brothers have to bring a proof. In other words, even though Rav says that when the managing brother is alive, then the managing brother has to bring proof that these fields belong to him. But if he died, so now that he died, how are you going to ask him? The idea is that, listen, if he cannot bring proof that these fields with his name on it are his, then that's suspicious. You should be able to bring proof. So as long as he's alive, he has to bring proof. Otherwise, the other brothers can take it from him. But once that managing brother dies, his sons, those orphans, they don't necessarily have access to the proof. They're not going to know precisely where it came from and know what witnesses to ask and how to get proof. And therefore, we switch it. So Rav would agree with me, Shemuel says, that the brothers would have to bring proof in order to take those particular lands away from the orphans and say, oh yeah, your father, stole these lands from us as the managing director. They would have to bring proof. Now Rav himself, we don't know if he actually agreed with what Shemuel said. Shemuel saying, I think that Rav would agree to this. And in fact, we have a challenge against Shemuel's last statement here that Rav would have agreed with this. Matkif la Rav Papa kelum ta'aninan lehu liyatme midi de la te'an lehu abuhon. Rav Papa says, do we make a claim on behalf of orphans if it's something that the father himself would not be able to make a claim? We don't generally do that. And here, Rav said that the father, he would not be able to just make a claim, oh, these are mine. No, the father has to bring a proof. And therefore, if the father has to bring a proof, then the orphans also will have to bring a proof. We're not going to give more credit to the orphans that they have a claim that's stronger than the father's claim. Just like the father has to bring a proof, so too do the orphans. And the Papa is going to prove this point. V'harava apek zugad sadbela v'sifra de'agadata miyatme belo re'aya bedvarim asuyim lash'il ul haskir. And after all, Rava, that's Papa's teacher, he removed scissors and the book of Agadah from orphans without a proof. Because that's the law regarding things that are usually lent out and borrowed. As Rav Huna taught, ki dishlach Rav Huna bar Avin, devarim asun lash'il ul haskir, ve'amad lekuchin hen biyadi, eno ne'eman, kashya. As Rav Huna sent the following law to the sages, he says, if when you're talking about items that are typically lent out and rented, there are certain things that you don't lend out, right? Your dining room table, you're not going to lend out. But other things, hammers, lawnmowers, these are things that people generally borrow from each other. In such a case, let's say I have a pair of scissors that's mine, and I have witnesses that recognize these scissors. Now, they are in your house. I bring witnesses, and the witnesses say that these belong to me. They belonged to me. Now you claim, oh no, you gave it to me, right? They're mine now. You sold them to me. In that case, because these are things that are typically lent out, scissors are generally lent out, and books also are generally lent out. So therefore, this guy who has it has to bring proof that, in fact, it's his, that he bought it, or that he got it in some way. Otherwise, if the borrower does not have proof, then since I have witnesses that these are mine, that they originally were mine, I can take them back from the so-called the borrower who is claiming that he owns them. That is the general rule, and so we apply that rule to a person himself, and the Rava applied that to the orphans also. In other words, there was a father who borrowed a scissors or a book of Agadah. This is interesting, by the way, in and of itself, that generally during the time of the Tanaim and Amoraim, the oral law was still oral. They did not write down the Mishnah or the Talmud. However, that applied to halacha, legal sections of the Talmud, when it came to Agadah, that the sages did write down. Agadah, these are long stories and difficult to remember, so the main prohibition of writing down Torah Sheba'al Peh applied to halacha and not Agadah. Right, so here you see a book. A book means a scroll of Agadah. There's no reference in the Talmud to a scroll of halachot. The only thing you have is like letters that sometimes they would write from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, or the other way around, and so they might write a halacha in a letter, but not as a recorded document, just because they want to send a message without sending a person. Okay, anyway, so a case came just like this, where there was a father who had a book of Agadah that belonged to someone else. And now that guy died, and now the orphans have it. And someone came and said, that book of Agadah is mine. I have witnesses that said, I wrote that book of Agadah. I owned it beforehand. And the orphans, they're like, I don't know, we inherited this. So Rava took it from them because this is a type of item that generally is lent out. So we see from here that we do not make a claim on behalf of orphans if we would not make the claim on behalf of the father. In other words, just like here, a father, we would take away the book from the father, so too we take the book away from the orphans. And we don't say, oh, well, you could take it from the father, but the orphans, no, it's it's theirs. No, we treat the orphans the same way as the father, and therefore Rav Papa challenges the last statement of Shemuel that Rav would agree that if the father died, then the brothers have to bring proof. Not so. Just like when the father is alive, the father has to bring proof that these other estates that are in his name are really his. So too, when the father dies, we're not going to make an extra claim on behalf of the orphans. Still, the orphans will have to bring proof that somehow this really belonged to their father. So that's Rav Papa. Rav Papa is claiming that that Rav would disagree with Shemuel in all cases, whether the father is alive or not, and this is a difficult challenge that we don't answer. Amar Rav Chisda, lo shanu ela de'en chalukin be'isatan, aval chalukin be'isatan, emor be'isato kames. Rav Chisda gives a limitation on Rav's rule. Rav says, when does the brother, who's the managing brother, have to bring proof that that these lands that are in his name, and he's writing documents in his own name, are his? Only when the brothers are not separate in their dough, meaning that they share everything. They probably live together and they share all of their expenses. They're continuing to live off the estate, just like when the father is alive, and let's say they're dependent on their father. And so the father pays for everything. And so too, they're all sharing from the expenses of the estate and using it. They don't split off any amount of money for themselves. In that case, then we suspect that the brother, the managing brother, took more than he was, took money from the estate and used it to go buy these fields, and he has to bring a proof that he really got it from elsewhere. However, if they have separate bank accounts, they have separate expenses, they're separated even just in their dough, in what they eat, then we can say that the managing brother, he reduced his own portion. So let's say they each take an allowance from the estate, right? And they each take $100 a week. And they use it for their own expenses. Or if he has his own income from elsewhere. So if they are separate in their consumption of food or any other thing that they have separate accounts, in that case, we can assume that the managing brother, he spent less from his allotment, and therefore he went and bought other fields through that allotment, and he doesn't have to bring a proof. He doesn't have to bring a claim. Oh, it's from my mother's side. He can just claim that he doesn't have to claim anything. He has these documents. They have his name on it. There's a clear way in which he could afford to buy things on his own because they don't share all their expenses. In that case, Rav Chisda thinks that Rav would agree that the other brothers have to bring a proof. The managing brother does not have to bring a proof. Now we ask, when we say that someone has to bring a proof, specifically Rav, that the managing brother has to bring a proof, what kind of proof? What would serve as sufficient proof? Rabba amar re'aya be'adim. Rav Sheshet amar re'aya be'kiyum hashtar. So Rabba said that he would have to bring proof with witnesses that this managing brother, he bought this land from someone else with his own money, and he got that money inherited from his mother's family. That's how he got it. He needs to get witnesses. So that's a higher level of proof. Rav Sheshet says he could just use the very document. Now, here's the problem. That document, we're suspicious that he just put his name on a document regarding land that really belongs to all of them. So how can you bring proof from a document? The answer is b'kiyum ashtad, the ratification of the document. Whenever you have a legal document, it's not effective by itself. It has to be brought to a court, and the Bet Din has to ratify it and see, are these witnesses, did they really sign it? Is this really their signatures? And they'll look into it when they do that. And if they ratify the document and says, yes, this is true, right? Really, this land does belong to this guy. So that's sufficient. As long as the Bet Din ratified the document, then they checked whatever that needed to be checked. and that is sufficient proof that the managing brother really owns these items. So he doesn't have to bring witnesses. It's enough that he ratify the document. Amar le Ravad Rav Nachman, ha Rav veha Shemuel, ha Rabba veha Rav Sheshat, mor keman sibira le. So Rav Rav Nachman. Here we have two machalokot. We have the controversy between Rav and Shemuel, and we also have another controversy between Rabba and Rav Sheshat about what constitutes proof according to Rav. So who do we follow for halacha? Amale ana matnita yada'na. And Rav Nachman answered, I know a baraita. It's also a tosefta that will provide an answer because it supports the opinion of Rav. So at least for that controversy, I know the answer. Detanya, echad minachin shaya noten venoseh betoch habayit vayu onot ushtarot yosin al shemo ve'amar shelihen shenaflu li mibet abi ima alav lavi re'aya. The Braita says that if you have brothers, and one of them is a managing brother, and he is buying and selling within the house, meaning for the estate. And there is also a document, sale documents, and other documents that have his personal name on it, not in the name of the whole estate. And that managing brother says, "These are mine. I inherited these from my mother's family." That the managing brother has to bring proof, because we suspect that he may have stolen it from the other brothers. He has to bring proof. So that's a proof. That's a source that halacha is like Rav. So at least between Rav and Shemuel. Now, what constitutes a proof that this Braita doesn't address, but at least the halacha is like Rav. Now we continue to quote the rest of the Braita. V'chen ha'isha she'i noset v'notenet betoch habayit v'hayu onot ushtarot yosin al shema ve'amra shelihen shenaflu li mibet abi abba or mibet abi ima aleha lehabi re'aya. If there is a woman who is buying and selling, engaging in business regarding her house, meaning an estate. Her husband died, and let's say there's children, there's heirs, orphans from their father, and she is managing the estate on behalf of these child orphans. And she also has bills of sale and other documents that are in her name. She's buying and selling fields, and now the suspicion is, did she take from the estate that which is not hers and start buying and selling these things? So she claims and says, these are mine. I got them from my own grandfather, her father's father or mother's father, that they died and she inherited from her own family. So she has her own personal property, and she also is the custodian of the property on behalf of these heirs. So who do we believe? So the Baraita says she has to bring proof. It's the same thing. Just like a managing brother has to bring proof that he has his own property that he's buying and selling, so too, this wife has to bring proof that she has other properties that belong to her, and she's not stealing from these orphans. Okay, that's the end of the Baraita. Now that we quoted the second part, we ask, Mai vechen, why do I need the second case? Isn't it the same as the first case? I could have figured it out myself. Because I might have thought that since for this woman, it's praiseworthy for her that she is the custodian. The fact that the Bet Din trusted her with to manage the affairs, and that she is buying and selling to help orphans. So this is a very laudable, praiseworthy thing to do that she would be proud of. So I might have thought that she's not going to steal from orphans. This would be like really look bad. Generally, when you give someone a place of honor and trust them, then they're going to safekeep that. They're going to appreciate that and make sure to do a really good job and not steal or mishandle the funds, because look, everybody's seeing me as a trustworthy person and I'm doing it for orphans. I better do a good job. So I might have thought that in that case the wife does not have to bring a proof regarding some other documents for other property that she herself owns. And therefore, I need to add this case to teach us, not so, it doesn't make a difference. Even though, for brothers, it might be more likely that a managing brother will steal from his brothers more than that a wife will steal from orphans. So maybe it's more likely or less likely, but it doesn't matter. The law is the same, that the wife also will have to bring proof that these other properties that she is buying and selling, in fact, belong to her. במה דברים אמורים? במחזיק, אבל בנותן מתנה ואחים שחלקו וכו'. So now we're going all the way back to the Mishnah, which was quite a while ago on Daf 42. And we're going to analyze the last part of the Mishnah. So the first half of the Mishnah says that the following people cannot make a chazakah. We listed all the different people that cannot make a chazakah, because the assumption is that the owner wouldn't mind that they are there, like if they're related and so on. So they cannot consume something for 3 years and then claim it's theirs. The second half says, when do we say that you have to be there for 3 years? That's if you want to make a chazakah, meaning a presumption of ownership, where the other person is contesting it and saying, no, it's mine, and you're saying it's yours, and you're there for 3 years, and you say, you bought it from me. That's when you have to make a chazakah, be there for 3 years, and these people, because of their relationship, cannot make a chazakah. So you need to be there for 3 years when you're making a chazakah. However, if someone wants to give a gift, or to someone else, or brothers who are dividing an estate, or if there's property that belonged to a convert who has no relatives and who dies, and then anyone who comes and takes it can take it. In these 3 cases where someone is simply trying to make an acquisition, we're talking about the 2 different definitions of chazakah. In the first half, the chazakah means, except for omanin, but for the other ones, the word chazakah means to establish a presumption of ownership. They're saying, I got it because I bought it from you, and the 3 years of using it is simply proof that this is so. That's creating a presumption of ownership. But here, and that's what the word machazik here means also. But then in the rest of it, we're talking about hareh zo chazakah. This is a way of taking possession and actually transferring something, if it's a gift from one person to the other, or if it's an estate from the estate to the private property of one of the brothers, or from hefker to the person that's taking it. In the case of nichsei hager, it's not just, it doesn't automatically become yours just because you looked at it. You have to actually do something. For example, if you lock the gate or fence it up or break the gate or things like that, then that creates a ownership over the item and it transfers. Okay, so now we quoted that part, and now we ask, Atu kol haneh damrinan la bene chazaka ninu. Now we have a question. It sounds like the Mishnah is talking about 2 different types of people. Some people can make a chazakah for 3 years, but if you're doing something and giving money, giving a gift, or splitting a property, then those people cannot make a chazakah for 3 years. So the structure of this Mishnah is confusing. What does this mean? And so we explain. כגון מוכר עומד לא מכרתי ולוקח אומר לקחתי. So when do we say that you need to have an established a usage of 3 years? That's when you're trying to make a chazakah, meaning a presumption of ownership, when you're fighting against a claim. For example, the seller says, I never sold it to this guy. He's been squatting on my land illegally. And the buyer says, I bought it from you. You did sell it to me. And now we don't know who's telling the truth. If the buyer has been there for 3 years and the seller didn't say anything, then we believe the buyer. So that's when you have to be there for 3 years. That's the beginning. Right? When do we say that you need 3 years to create a chazakah? When you're fighting against someone else who's claiming that they have it. But if everybody's in agreement, aval chazakah she'eni matana, there's no counterclaim. Kegon noten matana, achin shel chalku v'machzik b'nichsei hager, til mikneh be'almahu na'al gadar paras kol shehu. However, if there's no counterclaim, for example, I'm giving you a gift. I want to give you the gift. I agree. You agree. Or brothers, they're not contesting each other's claims. They're simply dividing an estate, or someone who's taking possession of someone who died without heirs. And so anybody can, whoever takes acquisition first, gets it? In this case, this is only to create an acquisition. You don't have to prove anything. There's no counterclaim. That's what this part is talking about. So as long as someone locked the gate or built a fence, breached a fence, did any of these, even a little bit, that creates the chazakah, that actually makes them the owner. Taneh Rav Hoshaya b'Kiddushin debe Levi. So Rav Hoshaya taught a braita that's recorded in a collection of braitot regarding Kiddushin in this school of Levi. Kiddushin talks about different ways of acquiring different items. So it makes sense that this would be a braita there. Na'al gadar paras koshu befanav harezo chazaka. It says if someone locks the door of a property or fences it in or breaches the fence even a little bit, that creates ownership. Now we analyze. Befanav in shelo befanav la. That means it has to be in the presence of the person who is bequeathing it, giving it as a gift. So it has to be in their presence. What if it's not in their presence? What if someone says, I want to give you a gift and they're not around, and then I want to go and take it? Can I go and fence it in, not in their presence? Amar Rava hachika amar befanav lo serich lememar lechazek ukneh shelo befanav serich lememar lechazek ukneh. So Rava explains as follows. If someone is selling in a field to someone else and the seller is there, then the seller does not need to say the phrase, go take possession and acquire it. As long as they made the sale, right, the buyer gave money to the seller, and that's it. The seller is there. The buyer can simply go, lock the door, and then it becomes his. Because the seller is there, sees him doing it, doesn't protest, and so that indicates that it belongs to the buyer. However, if they're off-site, the buyer and seller are somewhere else, and the buyer gives the seller money, and then the buyer cannot just go and take it. Rather, the seller has to give a command. Go, possess, and take it. And he's not around. The seller's not coming with him. Then the buyer can travel alone, go to the land, lock it, and then it becomes his. So, if he's not around, then he has to say the statement. But if he's there, then it's okay. That's regarding a sale. Rav asked, what about regarding a gift? There also, does the giver of the gift have to say this phrase in order for the gift to take place, for the transaction to happen? Or can he just take it even without saying the phrase? Amar Shemuel, Maiti ba'ele le'aba. Shemuel is wondering at this question of Rav, who Shemuel calls him by his first name, Abba, right? Why are you asking this question? Hashta uma mecher dekayahi blezuzeh. I amar lechazek uknein. Ila la matana lo kol sheken. I could figure it out from a kal vachomer. If regarding a sale where the buyer gives money to the seller and the seller accepted it, so it seems very clear that they're both agreeing to this, and the seller, by accepting the money, that act is an agreement to sell the land, and yet the seller, if he's not around and not present, he has to say the phrase "go and acquire it." And otherwise, it's not a valid sale. So for a gift, all the more so. In the gift, there's no transfer of money. There's no action done beforehand. So how are we going to know what the gift giver really wants to do? So if in the case of a sale where he accepted money and he still has to say the statement, and regarding a gift, all the more so, if he's not present, the gift giver should have to say the statement. So Shemuel says, the answer is obvious. Why are you asking the question? Rav said, Rav thought it was a good question because he thinks that someone who gives a gift is giving generously, and therefore generally a gift giver will not require that, you took it without me saying this phrase, right? We have to follow the protocol and I have to say the phrase. Usually someone giving a gift, he's in a generous mood, he's giving something away, and therefore he would not mind if the receiver goes and just takes it. So I might think that, and it could be that regarding a sale, there he doesn't really want to sell his land. He needs the money. Okay, he takes the money, but you can't just go and take it until he really is resolved that he totally wants to give the gift, and he says the statement, and that shows he really wants to give the land in a sale. So he has to say it in order for us to affirm that he really means this sale and he's going to give the land in the sale. But regarding a gift, maybe not, because he obviously is in a generous mood, and so we would not require him to say it. And so therefore, Rav thinks that this was a good question to ask, even though Shemuel thought that the answer was obvious. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.